Assalamu alaikum. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. قل هو رب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر وسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. نبي هدني يالي.
Are we set to go? Great.
Yep.
Thank you everyone for joining us today for a very important event focusing on citizenship, patriotism, and activism in an Islamic American context. And I'd like to first of all thank our guests for being here today, and also the organizers, Bayam, which stands for Message of Peace. It's an organization based out of New Jersey that has been doing great work for the broader part of 40 years. They're one of the key organizers of Imam Hussein Day. Just to put things into context, we live in very interesting times, both for the the state of American politics, as well as the state of Muslims in American politics, and the broader Muslim community, as well as more specifically the Shia community. For context, we have the 1-year anniversary of the George Floyd murder coming up this year. We have the most recently in the media, the issue of Palestine, and also the 100th year anniversary of the demolition of Jannat al-Baqi, which is so important for the Shia community and started almost a century of a lot of targeted violence focusing on the Shia community. And here in America, we have the opportunity to be engaged in the political system, more so in a lot of other countries across the world, and to really have our voices heard and to be impactful. That being said, there is a diversity of opinion out there within our community as to how to engage. What is the best route to engage? How do we engage with our elected officials? Do we not engage with our elected officials? Do we stay and protest? What is the best way to make a difference while holding on to our Muslim identity, holding on to our Shia identity, and voicing topics that are important to us and important, hopefully, to the rest of the world as well. So with that, I'm actually going to start to introduce our esteemed guests today, because I know some of them have other obligations as well. So first, I want to introduce Dr. Sadaf Jaffer. She is an educator, scholar, activist, and candidate for New Jersey General Assembly in the Legislative District 16. She recently completed 2 terms as mayor of Montgomery Township, New Jersey. And in January 2019, she became the first South Asian woman to serve as mayor of a municipality in New Jersey, and the first Muslim woman to serve as a mayor of a municipality in the United States. I know I've been following her for a very long time, and it's a pleasure to have her here with us today. She's a real trailblazer from the community and a role model for a lot of us. So please welcome her. And she's going to be talking about running and winning and leading in elected office. And she's running now as well. So please, Sadaf, I'll hand the floor to you.
Great, thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. It's really nice to be here with you. So I want to just share a little bit about my journey and my story, because as you heard, we don't really have a lot of South Asians in politics. We don't have a lot of Muslims in politics. We don't have a lot of women in politics. And somehow having all of those, that intersection of all those identities, I did get involved in politics. So I wanted to talk a little bit about my path and the work that I've done. So I was, always interested in social justice issues. I think that a lot of us growing up in the Shia community, just learning about the injustices that have happened in the world, it really creates that soft spot in our heart to say that we need to speak out against injustice and we need to work to create a better society. And so that was always, a principle that guided me or that I was raised with. And I thought I wanted to go into diplomacy. So I went to the School of Foreign Service at Georgetown, again, thinking that I could bridge different societies, different cultures. But I became very interested in my studies, especially when it came to Islamic history. And I pursued a PhD in Near Eastern languages and civilizations at Harvard University. So then I was on the academic track, and that's a great track. Educating the public and educating young people is an amazing way to impact our society. But I also started getting more involved politically. Certainly in undergraduate, I was involved in terms of activism. I was a freshman the first week of my freshman year at college when the September 11th attacks happened. And so obviously that motivated me to want to learn more about Islam and Islamic history because of how it was being misused and mischaracterized. But it also kind of taught me how important the political realm is because, being in academia, I was taking classes with professors who were telling us very directly that, what the outcomes of the war in Iraq could be. And it's been really heartbreaking to see those outcomes kind of happen over the last 20 years. So I was very, I really experienced the gap between academia and policy as well. So I got involved to, my first election that I voted for president was, and I assumed that President Bush would not win re-election, and he did. And so that was a shock to me and everyone who went to college with me, because everyone I knew was certain that he would lose. And so actually, I would say that when people were shocked that Trump won, I wasn't so shocked because I'd already gone through that shock before of thinking, oh, it's so obvious. But, nothing in politics is obvious. You have to build your coalitions. You have to convince people. You have to bring people along with you. And so I campaigned for President Obama when he ran both times. I was involved with South Asians for Obama. And then I actually, really, when I moved to New Jersey, both my husband and I teach at Princeton University. That was the first time when I had a very, very conservative congressperson who was at odds with my values and my perspectives, very much so. So it was really his opposition to the Iran deal that got me calling his office regularly. And I realized that he was never going to change his mind. He was just set in his ways. And that's when I realized that it was important for people who shared my values, who valued diplomacy, to be in elected office. And so I participated in a program called Emerge, which is for women from the Democratic Party who are interested in running for office. And that kind of gave me the skills and tools needed to connect with the New Jersey State Democratic Party, the County Democratic Party, the local Democratic Party. And I became a co-chair for the county's South Asian American caucus of the Democratic Party. And I was campaigning for someone who was running for office, who was running for Congress, actually, when I was approached and someone asked me and said, there's no Democrats running in your town. You should run for local office. And because I had done that training program, I had the confidence to say, okay, I'll try it. So in 2016, I ran as a write-in candidate. I did not win, but in 2017, I ran on the ballot and I won, becoming the first and only Democrat on the township committee. And then over the course of the next 2 years, we flipped the township committee to all Democrats, and I became the mayor in 2019. So that's a bit about my path and how I got there. And I would say, along the way, there were a lot of people who were like, how is a Muslim going to get elected in this town that definitely doesn't have a huge Muslim population? Our South Asian population is about probably 20% of the township. So even that is not enough to just win someone an election. And what I always told people was that, I'm not that cynical. I think that people, if you speak to them, if you connect with them, and the way that I did that was by attending as many community events as I could, as many, the Boy Scouts events, the Girl Scouts events, people got to know me and I got to know them. And I would say that, a lot of people from our communities are very, very focused on national and international issues. And those issues are very, very important. But we neglect the local, we neglect the state level elections, and those all have an impact on your day-to-day lives. And I will say, the experience that really brought that home for me was the COVID crisis. As somebody who has experience and could see what was happening in China, could see what happened in Iran, could see what happened in Italy, I tried to be very careful and conservative and, advocated for us closing our municipal building early, our school district closed before we had a single case in my town. And then I developed a crisis communications plan to connect with the public. I created videos, and all of those things, I think, were really informed by me having a global perspective, by me being able to see and knowing that, kind of that the whole American exceptionalism idea, we're human beings, and we're vulnerable to disease and just like anybody else is. So we can learn from what has gone wrong or right in other places. And I would say, so that value of caring for your community, I've been able to lead through that. And again, now I'm running for state assembly, which is, in New Jersey. And if elected, I'll be the first Muslim in the state assembly. And I'll actually be the first Asian American woman in the assembly. So we have a lot of work to do in terms of representation, but we're making progress. And I want people to feel empowered. There's nothing standing in your way. I think people get scared and they think, oh, you need a whole bunch of money to run. And that's not really true. It's helpful, it can help to have money, but it's not a necessity in the sense that you can make up for it. If you don't have a lot of money, if you have volunteers who can call people, or if you're clever in your use of social media. But I will say that all those years, as I mentioned, 3 years in a row that we Democrats won, that Republicans always outspent us 3-1. And yet we still won because we had a stronger message. We were able to connect with people. So, don't let anything be a barrier. It is possible to get engaged. For the most part, people are just looking for smart, compelling, engaged candidates, because it is tough. I will definitely say that it is tough to be in elected office, but I see it as a public service. And it is so important that we have our community's representation, because we can share our experiences. When I was elected, there was an anti-Muslim bias crime the first year that I was on the local government, where someone left pork on a Muslim family's car. And the mayor at that time said, oh, we don't really know if what's motivating it. So I could share information saying, pork is used to target Muslims, and Islamophobia is a type of racism. And it's very important that we, deal with hate crimes early on when they're symbolic. Otherwise, they just keep escalating. So I always think how important it is that I was in that position, because if I wasn't there, maybe nobody would have said, we need to take this seriously. So that's a little bit about my path, my journey, and how I've led. But I would encourage people to do it. It is tough, but it's worth it. You make an impact, and you deserve to have that seat at the table. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Seth, we're doing well on time. Can I ask you a question? So in running for office, did you ever face challenges because you were Muslim? And if you could share any of those in particular, and maybe even because you come from a Shia background as well, if that is something you could talk about.
Sure. So my opponents did make a mailer when I was running in 2017 saying that my ideas were dangerous and extreme. And those were the biggest words on the flyer. And, I'm laughing now. At that point, I was mortified that thousands of people in my community were getting this flyer with my picture on it that said I was dangerous and extreme. And what were they going to think about me? And was I safe? Was my family safe? Especially it being, in the Trump presidency. It was scary. But unfortunately, we as Muslims have to deal with that. And I've had, when I became the mayor and people said, oh, you're the first Muslim woman to be a mayor, we should have press releases about it. I actually was like, I don't know if I want that much national attention on little old me, because I don't know how I'm going to cope with it. But the news spread and there were articles. And then it was featured in a Trump blog called Trump Train. And after that, I got a whole bunch of abuse on social media, on Twitter. And it was very demoralizing. There's no question about it. But the only way to move past it is to have more people from diverse backgrounds so that all the pressure isn't on the few that are there. And, in terms of being Shia, I think it comes out more in those Muslim solidarity political groups where people all assume that everyone believes a certain thing. And I'm like, wait a second, like, why is everyone on this boat? Like, I don't necessarily agree with you. So there are certainly, challenges with being the minority within the minority within the minority, but we have to be there. We have to represent ourselves. And, ultimately, as long as we're speaking from the right, that's the most important thing. As long as we are consistent, morally consistent, I will be just as critical of the government of Pakistan as I am of India, as I am of Iran, as I am of Israel, as I am of the United States. Like, let's just be morally consistent and not pick and choose. As long as you do that, then nobody can really say, oh, I mean, they can say it, but they won't have a justification if they say, oh, you're just saying this because X, Y, Z. So, I think it is important that our perspectives be represented. And I think, though it's challenging to be a minority within a minority, I also think that it creates empathy. Like, there's really no space where we're so much the majority that we're so comfortable. We'll always empathize with those people who don't have that power, who don't have that voice. So I try to see it as something that creates that empathy and gives us strength.
Thank you so much, Sadaf, and good luck on your campaign.
Thank you so
I'm going to introduce our next guest, Brother Rahat Hussain. He's a lawyer based out of the DC area who has been active. I've known him for a very long time, for the better part of 10 years, but let me tell you a little more about him. So for the past 10 years, Rahat Hussain has worked tirelessly to advocate on behalf of the Shia Muslim community and issues at the White House, in Congress, at the Senate, with federal agencies, think tanks, NGOs, policy institutes, and academic experts. In 2015, he had a private meeting at the White House with President Obama where he discussed Shia genocide. At the same time, Rahat is also a patent attorney and works for the pharmaceutical industry. With that, I'd like to actually invite Rahat to share some of his insights and feedback about the work that he's been doing for the greater part of a decade. So Rahat, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum. I really appreciate the speakers for inviting me, Naki, Hassan, everyone. I think this is a great program, and I think the community will gain quite a bit from it. One of the things I wanted to discuss was the history of political activism in the Shia community. A lot of people, they think the Shia community mostly arrived in the late 70s, maybe the early 70s, a bit the 60s. But actually, we have records that show that Shia Muslims were on the Titanic. And a few names were even present in the roles of the Union in the Civil War. So our community has been here for a long time, but as we all know, it's been growing quite a bit. But I'm going to fast forward to 2000. The year 2000, there were very few Shia Muslim national organizations. There was Nasimco, there was Muslim Group of USA and Canada, there were individual mosques. We had the occasional conference. We had the Imam Zamana conference, other regional events, youth group events, but there was no real national grouping, national coalition, efforts to unite the entire American Shia Muslim community. So after 2001, the attacks, September 11th attacks, that really changed quite a bit. And quite a few groups were inspired by that, inspired by the need to let America know about the true Islam, about our community, about our beliefs. And a few sprung up. By 2003, there was Ummah, there was Islamic Information Center, there were a few more. The next year, it grew, Muslim Congress and others. And one of the first things that happened when all these groups sprung up was a huge community-wide debate on the role of politics, political activism, and related issues, and how that would play with the Shia community. Shia Muslims getting involved with interacting with government, advocating, taking meetings. For many, this was immensely controversial. For others, it was viewed as something that's absolutely necessary, especially given the consequences that would happen if we did not. And others viewed it as a religious duty in the time of the absence of the Imam to really get involved with as much politics as possible. But the debate really did not end. It still continues today. And there's many communities that still struggle with this issue. But moving forward, by 2009, there's more than a dozen national Shia Muslim groups. There's Shia Rights Watch, Americans for Democracy and Human Rights in Bahrain, Souls March is starting to start up, many others, Jannah and others. And a lot of these groups have started taking meetings with congressional officials, representatives of Congress, Senate, State Department. And the idea was we need to start connecting. But this was a very early stage for the community. Individuals probably had more expertise, but as a community, it was very much, let's just say hello to them, let's meet with them, let's get some photo ops. There wasn't this real pressing understanding or need to advocate for specific issues. And the reason for that was not nefarious. It's just, that there was not a lot of understanding of how the political process works. A lot of people really took the ideas of political work from their home countries, India, Pakistan, Lebanon, etc., about how things are done, and they tried to apply it to the American sphere. And it took some time to learn. But we saw progress after some time. A Shia Muslim, Maulana Naqvi, led the prayers from Congress on one of their opening sessions. We saw Senator John Kerry start talking about Imam Hussein on the Senate floor, and we saw slowly things started to grow. By 2014, many Sunni groups had started to coordinate with Shia groups. We started seeing the beginnings of chairs at academic universities, the Imam Ali Chair at Hartford Seminary, and there was Syria became a major international issue. And what happened was, here in the United States, all the Sunni groups were very much in favor of the US government attacking the Syrian government, engaging in another military expedition. There was Republican support for an attack. There was Democratic support for an attack. And in 2014, there was a meeting between all the groups who had an interest in Syria. There were numerous Sunni groups. There were a few Christian Syrian groups, and a few Shia groups were involved. And the Shia groups really made the point that, whatever we do, we can't abandon the minority communities in Syria. There was a meeting with the White House National Security Advisor, and there was this huge push to protect the minority communities in Syria, regardless of what else was happening. And in the end, President Obama decided that he would not attack Syria and not engage in military action there, or direct military action at least. So that was something I think a majority of Shia community members supported, the idea that the US should not be involved in another military conflict, especially one where it would result in emboldening extremists and harming the minorities of Syria, which include, of course, Shia, but also Christians, Druze, and others. So at this point, we're starting to see that our community has stronger influence, has widespread ability to get our points across. And then by 2016, we're seeing that there are many Shia groups that are taking regular meetings at the White House, regular meetings at State Department. They're involved with the Department of Justice Civil Crime, Civil Rights Group, where they're meeting with Vanita Gupta, who now is an undersecretary at DOJ, or in the Attorney General's office, I'm sorry. And we're seeing immense opportunity for Shias to enact change, to be involved with politics at a very high level, and not just taking meetings, not just taking photo ops, but really pushing for changes in agenda and policy. Groups like Shia Rights Watch are at State Department every week at this point, really talking about ISIS and others and how they're dramatically and harmfully affecting the Shia communities in Iraq and other countries. Ummah is there talking about domestic Shia issues. And in 2015, as Naki mentioned, I had the opportunity to meet with President Obama in his first ever public meeting with Muslims. And in that meeting, I specifically spoke with him about the issue of Shia genocide, which is something that our community talks about, but it's not something that's really discussed in depth. But the benefit of that meeting with the president was that later that summer, Secretary of State John Kerry at the time declared a Shia genocide at the United Nations, which opened up significant funding and protections for community members in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and other places that couldn't have been possible without the advocacy from our community. By 2018, Trump is in office, and a lot of the community believes that it's over. The good days are over. We won't be able to get anything done. We're basically in a state of oppression, but that's not the case. Many Shia groups, including some efforts I was involved with, were able to interact with the Trump administration, go to the White House, talk about a lot of different issues. But the most major accomplishment was that we were able to secure numerous visas for Shia scholars, despite the Muslim ban, to allow them to enter the United States for Muharram and other activities. I won't mention the names of the scholars, but a lot of the top most famous scholars that are well known were able to enter the US through these types of efforts. 2020, by 2020, it's completely different. Now, the issue of whether we should be involved in politics as a community, whether we should engage in political activism, that debate is completely settled. Everyone believes that it must be done. And there's immense community support for Bernie Sanders amongst all the groups, all the Muslim groups. But at the same time, we're also seeing a significant portion of the Muslim community supporting Trump, others supporting Biden. We're running the whole gamut at this point. But the big positive is that everyone's involved, and many people are running for office from the Shia community. There are about 10 to 15 candidates for office from the Shia community. Many won their elections. We're seeing that it's a diverse set of Muslims, Shia Muslims running for office. It's not just the normal Indo-Pak or the Arabs. It's a diverse group of races, and it's fantastic for the community. We're really getting to this level where we're not asking someone else to push our agenda. We're pushing our own agenda, for the betterment of the United States, for the betterment of the world, and we're really letting our ideas be known. At the same time, when Biden got into office, we pushed numerous Shia candidates for political appointees positions. I think at least 24 candidates were pushed, and many of them are being considered by the Biden administration for an appointment. That's an immense set of progress in 21 years. And what resources were used. I mean, we all know that in the Shia community, no one is donating to the idea of Shia Muslims being engaged in political activism. There's not fundraisers for political work. There's very few even discussions of paying for lobbyists. And frankly, we don't need that. We have had all of the success over this time period with the work of volunteers, with the work of dedicated people, with the work of community members who believe that this is their moral duty, their religious duty. And we've gotten to the top levels. Shias are regularly meeting with secretary level positions. They're at the White House. They're meeting with Congress, Senate. Numerous Shias have met with Nancy Pelosi and the leaders of Congress and Senate. I mean, we're at every level of government. We're pushing for our beliefs. We're pushing for not just the advancement of Shiism. We're pushing for a better world under the rubric of our understanding of our beliefs and using that to help the worldwide and the domestic community. So we've done quite a bit, and there's a lot more to do, but I'm really excited to see what happens next. In 20 years, we went from no national organizations to several national organizations. Some of them are race-based, some of them are not, some of them are religious, some of them are political, but we're a very diverse community. We're gaining in political influence and social influence. I think, we've seen across the United States the rise of numerous billionaires and such that, there are a lot of issues with that, but we're also seeing in a more positive way, we're seeing our own Shia community members becoming millionaires, becoming 100 millionaires, and pumping that money back into the community to support initiatives. So our community is growing. The reason I wanted to give this talk was to express that, there's a lot of good news, a lot of positivity about what can be done. Any community member can get involved at any level to accomplish a great deal. A lot of people may not realize this. I really wanted to just discuss how we've grown in really such an amazing way over this time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rahat. We'll pick it up during Q&A. That was great. So now I'd like to actually invite Zara Heather. She is a filmmaker, a political journalist at Now This, the #1 digital video news publisher worldwide. She also runs a photography business based out of Dallas, Texas, called Black Iris Photography. In the past, Zara was on the forefront of the Israel divestment movement at Northwestern University. And she's going to be talking about the creative sphere and our identity in that space. And I'll hand it over to her, and hopefully she'll get a chance a little bit to talk about the current state of affairs as well with Israel and Palestine.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you, Neki. This has been really, really powerful to hear from everyone, from Sadaf and Rahat. I really appreciated Rahat's breakdown. It's made me very appreciative of our progress over the years. I'm one of the few Shias that's probably met Nancy Pelosi, and I'm somebody that covered politics on the Hill for 3.5 years in DC. And I know that many of you have worked in that space as well. And it's something that I never expected myself to be in, and in spaces where I never expected any Shia to be in. And it's been really, really powerful and eye-opening to see what doors can be opened, especially in 2021 and moving forward. And so I just want to start with a little bit of my background and what I do. I'm someone who grew up in Dallas, Texas. I went to Northwestern University to study multimedia journalism and, did my own filmmaking and work on the side. During that time, I went to South Africa and worked as a multimedia reporter for 4 months. And, during my time in South Africa, that was something that taught me a lot about what I'll talk about later, which is intersectional solidarity as Muslims, and how much I learned from the South African anti-apartheid movement as it kind of translates into my coverage of Israel and Palestine. Working there firsthand, seeing, young people in South Africa continuing the movement to decolonize South Africa and to remove the remnants and systemic oppressions that remain from what apartheid was in that country. It has been really eye-opening for me, and I've learned so much from that experience. And then after that, I interned at CNN, and at CNN, I learned a lot about what legacy media looks like and the benefits and the challenges of moving up in that space. Not only as any journalist, but as specifically Muslim. At that time, I was also hijabi, and as a Shia, with all of these, with my identity constantly, feeling like it's coming into question and doubting my perspective, because in journalism school they teach you that you have to take your identity out of the story and you have to be objective. And there's this whole premise and this idea that in order to be a good journalist, you have to be neutral and you have to ascribe to this baseline objective narrative. And the reality is that that entire narrative is built on a system of white supremacy, where the white narrative is what's considered objective, is what's considered neutral. And so, it took me many years to come to terms with, removing my identity from a story doesn't make that story better, because there is no such thing as true objectivity in journalism. All we're trying to do is set and explain these same set of facts to our audience. And, there's a lot of room for manipulation, unfortunately, in how we tell our news. You can start with 3 different facts, A, B, and C, and you can start with B and C, and it's still a fact. And so, you have to take that into account with every story that you tell, that my identity does play a role. And instead of fighting that and denying that, it's about owning that and using that as a tool and a force to tell a better story and to tell a more authentic and in-depth story of, especially as Shias, of people that have been a minority within a minority, as Sadaf said. There's so many layers to unpack within everything that our community has been through and is going through, that lends us to become better, advocates in our communities, in different spaces and workplaces, and in creative spaces like the ones that I maintain. And so, after my internships and such, I moved into now this, which is, a news outlet, digital news outlet that primarily focuses on young people. And so I'm fairly young as myself. And so working on news for people just like me, the premise for our organization is, how do we tell news to someone next to you in a bar? How do you tell someone casually the same facts as, the New York Times and that type of thing? And so that's how they portray it. And it's basically just sending the idea that we can tell news in a digestible way, so it doesn't become something that's hierarchical and that politics is only for the old white men in the back of the room, but it's something that is attainable for all of us. And so young people can get engaged. And I've seen firsthand the benefits of this approach, with so many young people getting involved. As I've seen over the last few years, the Trump presidency inspired so many people to run that had never run before. And so in that space, I also was able to work with so many firsts, Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib and, AOC, and these people that I maintained relationships with on the Hill, and just seeing that they were inspired and negatively motivated by the Trump presidency, to see that, this is, if he can do it, why can't we? And why can't we own the space that we're in? And I'm seeing, the beginnings of, Shia representation in politics. And I'm not saying that that's the only way to be a patriot and that's the only way to make a difference, but that is a valid way. And seeing that the difference that those roles make, the amount of change that Rashida Tlaib has made in her 2 years on the Hill is just obscene. Like seeing her, walk up to President Biden this week with her, keffiyeh on and saying, hey, what's going on in Israel and Palestine needs to be held accountable for. And saying that to the president's face. This is a woman who had not even been on the Hill, who we couldn't have imagined on the Hill 4 years ago. And so these are just really, really powerful things that we've seen transition. And then I want to spend the last bit of my talk just about specifically, I worked on a story about Shia persecution at Now This, and it's a story that I spent over a year reporting on. And it's something that I feel that I actually broke news on, as opposed to a lot of the other content Now This does, which is, going off of other news outlets and, interviewing people, but it's really a reaction to the news that's happening. And so with the Shia persecution story, I was really grateful for having earned the trust and respect of my editors in order to pitch something like that had never been done, especially in the American space, but honestly in any space, even in Pakistani media, even more so. People have dangers on their lives to cover stories like that, and I have the privilege being here in America as a Pakistani American journalist that isn't tied by those same forces that unfortunately happen every day on the street in Karachi. And so, being able to cover this story was a privilege. And I spent, over a year speaking with experts all over the country, Shia experts and American experts, people who have studied this region, who have studied the history of what led to, what is becoming Shia genocide in Pakistan and a lot of other countries. And so, during that time, I spoke with experts, and then I tracked down all these different sources. And during that time, it was horrifying to me how many people were coming to me with their stories. I'll put out one tweet with a clip from one of my documentaries about Shia persecution, and I'll get 200 people responding this happened to my uncle, this happened to my father, this happened to my brother. And it's just such a prevalent story that isn't being told enough. And I was able to publish this 13-minute film, but it's nothing compared to what needs to be done to tell that story. And obviously diversity is important here, because if I hadn't been in those rooms and Now This, who would have told that story? And we don't need just me. We need so many more people that have this identity. And it's about how do we harness this? And instead of trying to tie it away and push it away as, this is an objective, well, my identity is my strength. It's giving me the power to tell a story that nobody else can. And that is informing the public. And it's showing people how, American money plays into that, and how, all these different structures that are in place that lead to Shias in Pakistan not being able to say out loud that they're Shia. And these are just really important stories that need to be told. And then, it also ties into a lot of the other stories that I do, because as Sadaf was saying, being Shia, it also leads you to be very empathetic, and it leads me to constantly question the narratives that are being told in the media, in politics, not taking things at face value, because there's just so many levels to every story, and looking at the underdog, looking at the people that are really disenfranchised. And, I'm based in Dallas now. And so, there was a story, Marvin Scott III, this Black man that was killed in police custody just last month. And he was 30 minutes from me and went to the same mall that I had. And that's where he was arrested by the police. And so, I, got to cover that story, speak with his family, and talk about why this issue is still so prevalent. And I believe that, my identity is something that allows me to tell that story. And obviously I'm not Black, and I never will understand that experience, but it's something that is still an asset, and it allows me to see these different intersections in our persecution, and what it means to be a woman, and what it means to be a Muslim in America, and also the Black experience, and how they all tie together, because you can't separate those things. They're all tied intrinsically to the same systems of colonization and white supremacy. And so seeing how all these things tie together and telling these stories in an authentic way that can have ripples into our future, I think it'll just create more change, like the change that Rahat is talking about in the future, to see our narratives being in the forefront of people's eyes and awareness. But yeah, thank you so much for your time, everybody.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That was really great. And we really appreciate all the work that you've been doing, and we'll pick it up in Q&A. With that, actually, I'd like to invite Brother Hassan Sheikh. Hassan was born and raised in Michigan. He received his bachelor's from Wayne State University and his master's in public administration from Oklahoma University with a focus on local government management and nonprofit management. In his prior roles, he served as the first executive director for the Michigan chapter of Engage, and then the director of community and economic development for the city of Hallmark. I'm mispronouncing that. He's currently serves as the deputy director of economic and community development for the city of Dearborn. It's a real honor to have him with us today. So please give him your attention. So Hassan, I'll hand the floor over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Naki. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. It's an absolute honor and a privilege to be here with you all today. I want to thank all the organizers for putting on such a great panel. I've already, in such a short time, learned so much from the three previous speakers, and it's been wonderful. And it's always a pleasure to sit on a panel with friends, colleagues, and people that I've admired and haven't had an opportunity to speak to before, but have admired their work from afar, such as Era. Your work has truly been wonderful and great, and really breaking down barriers for the community. I'm going to speak briefly, as I truly feel that the question and answer session in these types of panels are the meat of the program, right? A lot of people that have questions, that are weary of getting involved in politics, they have questions they want to be, they want to ask instead of being talked to in a lot of these sessions. So I want to speak briefly so we can get to that meat part of it, and I know that there'll be a lot of benefit from that. But I'm going to say a few words on being politically engaged and cultivating leadership within our communities. I myself am the son of immigrants, as my father came to the United States in 1977, my mother in 1986, after their marriage in Lahore. Shout out to the Punjabis, anybody that's listening out there, gotta shout it out. I was blessed as my family was always politically engaged. My father's mamus, otherwise the maternal uncles, immigrated him in the 1940s, and he was one of my dad's uncles was actually the first Pakistani elected judge in the entire country out of Macomb County. And it was an elected position. So he ran for office, and we're talking like in the 60s, 70s. And he was a Pakistani man with an accent, and he won an election. If you look up Macomb County these days, it's a heavy Trump supporting county. And back in those days, it was no different. So the fact that he won in those days, was really interesting, to say the least. And I know there's many people that are listening that can probably relate to the next part of what I'm going to say is, there were a lot of times growing up where we would sit at a dinner party, an Eid party, at a family gathering, at a gathering, and the conversation was controlled solely by foreign politics. And anytime that you saw that, my father or myself, who kind of grew up in an atmosphere where we were kind of based on local politics, having that in the family, tried to switch the subject and towards local politics, you would see that a lot of people in the room either had no interest, didn't have the passion, and or were somewhat interested, but didn't even know who their council members were, didn't know who their mayor was, didn't know the simple things of who they would reach out to if they have an issue, on the local level of, hey, what department would I reach out to if I have a trash issue in my street, simple issues that are all governed by your local municipalities. When the question of the passion was brought up, a lot of people may have seen the recent stand-up by Hassan Minhaj, and it was, for me, very entertaining when he brought up, the fact that a lot of the issues we see in our older generation, and kind of slowly being passed on, but hopefully diluting as the generations go on, is the lack of sense of ownership, the feeling that this is not necessarily my country, and being thankful for being here, and that's enough. And I'm going to put my head down, I'm going to work, and that's enough. But it's not enough. It just is not. And that sense of intrinsic mindset that unfortunately is something that we as a community need to work on. And I'm talking specifically when I'm saying this about the immigrant Muslim community. As Zara mentioned earlier in her talk, the first Muslim community that was here in this country was the Black Muslim community, who's paved the way for the immigrant Muslim community to come in here. And there's a lot that we can learn from our counterpart Muslim communities, as we are a very diverse community. And the Black Muslim community has been here the longest and has navigated a lot of the issues that we're navigating now for a very, very long time. And through conversations and relationship buildings, there's a lot that we can learn from there. in my house, not only was political engagement encouraged, but we grew up in a house where we attended rallies. And as the previous speaker spoke, being Shia, you can't every year when you sit and listen to Majlis and Muharram, you can't separate, the story of Karbala from lessons of modern day oppression, right? So when issues like Black Lives Matter, when issues of Palestine and Philistine come up, Shias are always at the forefront, and that's because culturally it's been ingrained within our minds, within our culture, within who we are, that we must stand up against oppression and stand up against injustices and stand up against those that are not being given a voice. And that was no different in my household as growing up.
I think we lost your audio, Hassan.
Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you now. Yep, we can hear you.
Sorry. So pretty much what I was saying was, the importance of standing up against oppression has also helped guide me in terms of where I'm at today. As in every Shia household, it was no different in my household, of being an activist, being at the protests, being at the rallies, being front and center at any issues of injustice, right? For a lot of people, this kind of says, okay, where can I make my impact as an activist, as taking these lessons from Muharram, taking these lessons as a Shia, where can I make the most amount of impact? For me, government and politics was where I felt that my personal journey is going to take me, and the space where I can make the most amount of impact. And that's where I'm at today. I started off in the nonprofit world, and today I sit as the Deputy Director of Economic Development, Economic and Community Development for the city of Dearborn, where it's under my term here as in my appointed position, we've had more Muslims hired than ever before. We've had a lot of systemic verbiage removed from documents and changed that, and mind you, Dearborn, everyone knows Dearborn nationally. Dearborn, is the largest Arab Muslim population outside of the Middle East. And unfortunately, I am the highest ranked Muslim American to ever hold a position in that city hall. We have currently Abdullah Hamoud, who's running for mayor, as well as a few other Muslim Americans running for mayor out of Dearborn. And hopefully that'll change with the next election. But as of right now, I'm the first, and that's bizarre. That's ridiculous. And before this, I was the first and highest ranked Muslim American to ever hold office in hold a seat in the administration in the city of Hamtramck, which, if you look at the population, is a very large Muslim American population as well. None of this would have been possible if I didn't have my parents to kind of guide me and give me the support to go down this road and create these avenues for other Muslim Americans to follow my footsteps in terms of municipal government specifically. Historically, the immigrant Muslim community saw the best way to increase power and impact via wealth. So you see a lot of positions, you see a lot of these power wealth positions, which are very humble roads and play an integral part in terms of activism and making change, but it's not the only way. So within our own households, within our own circles, a cultural change needs to be made in terms of what we make available and the information we provide to our young leaders. And I always say young leaders, I never say youth, because I strongly believe that you need to give the younger generation a title of power so they can work towards becoming powerful. And if you give them a title of, hey, you're just youth, they will stay just youth. And then also it makes it very hard for the older generation to pass that torch when they've continuously just called you youth your entire lives. If you refer to them as leaders your entire life, you feel comfortable and you know this is the leadership that's coming behind me. And we do see that as an issue within our communities as well. Muslim Americans, going back to the conversations, while back in the day they were controlled by foreign policy, fast forward, as Rahat gave us an incredible timeline of the Shia Muslim American community, but that's no different than the Muslim Ummah as a whole in this country. We are not just one policy issue, a one issue community. We care about a lot more than that. We care about the economy, we care about civil rights, criminal justice reform, infrastructure, education, the environment, the list goes on of issues that we care about that are more than just foreign policy based, domestic issues, local issues. Here in Michigan, we have Muslim Americans in high positions in every major office, major appointments, whether it's appointed or elected. From the governor's office, shout out to Ghida Dagger. Attorney General's office, shout out to Fadwa Hamoud, the first Muslim woman to ever hold that high of a seat in the entire state's history, and going after the people from Flint, who happens to be a Shia Muslim woman from Lebanese background from Dearborn. The Secretary of State, Zainab Hussein, the Deputy Chief of Staff, another hijabi Shia Muslim woman from Lebanese descent. In Congress, Rashida Tlaib. That's the sister who speaks truth to power always, right? The State House, we have State Representative Abdullah Hamoud serving his last term, a Shia Muslim brother from Lebanese background from Dearborn. Recently elected, State Representative Ibrahim Ayash from Yemeni background from the city of Hamtramck. Judges, city councils, mayors, local boards, school boards, the list goes on from what we've been able to do here in Michigan. This did not happen overnight. It happens by increasing Muslim civic participation, getting politically engaged. How do we do that? According to the Institute of Social Policy and Understanding, there are 4 data-driven ways to increase Muslim civic participation. 1 is build from the ground up. 2, mobilize at the masjids. 3, build coalitions with natural allies. And 4, focus on younger and economically disadvantaged voters. What does that mean? When you're talking about building from the ground up, you got to start local. When you're doing the work through, whether you're doing the work through an organization or if you're doing it in your personal capacity, start with your family. Start with your circle. Start with whom you know, right? You gotta walk before you start running. You have to take care of your own backyard before you start to mow someone else's lawn. Get involved in your local elections. Just get informed, get knowledgeable about what's going on in your own cities, going on in your own school boards. What are the issues in your surrounding area prior to trying to make impact elsewhere? Because this is where you can hone your skills. This is where you can make direct impact, and then you can expand from there. Mobilize at the masjids. Data shows that Muslims who attend the masjid are actually more likely to vote, contrary to popular belief. 74% of Muslims who attend masjid services actually vote. Of course, not all masjid leadership is always on board and or condones political engagement, but that's a problem in itself that we can have a whole different conversation on, right? We must continue to engage and have conversations with this leadership as hopefully it eventually changes. And furthermore, if a masjid's leadership doesn't necessarily condone it, that doesn't stop you from engaging your friends and or your circles that attend the masjid and really trying to get into their minds of why it's important to get engaged on your local level. In Michigan, I would say that we only, out of all the masjids here, there are about maybe 3 that are not civically engaged at this current moment. One of them, unfortunately, being the one that I grew up at, right? So you have 3 masjids, but the rest are all on board. And it's made it a lot easier for us to reach the community and for us to really engage with the community. Right now in Michigan, we have about 275,000 Muslims. Out of that 275,000, 200,000 are registered voters. Out of those 200,000 registered voters, 145,000 actually came out to vote in 2020. We won the election for many that won the state of Michigan single-handedly. The 145,000, you take away that vote, certain people are not winning Michigan. I know this is a C3 event, so I'm going to try to keep it as nonpartisan as possible, right? So, so we single-handedly made an impact. What does that mean for the future? You can go back to these individuals and or the party and or whatever, whoever may be running. That last election, we were the reason you won. If you want our continued support, you want our continued donations, you want our continued vote, this is what our asks, this is what we want. These are our asks, this is what our expectations are, and we will hold you accountable. You fail to do that, you won't get that support, right? And first, it's making the impact to show what our power is. And that's part of building our Muslim American power. And then after we show the power, it's using the power, right? An interesting statistic shows that American Muslims and Jews are the most likely to have voted for a Democrat in the 2018 midterm election. About 3/4 of Muslims and 69% of Jews voted for Democrat in 2018, compared with 50% of Catholics, 42% of Protestants, 17% of white evangelicals, and 66% of non-affiliated Americans. So whether it's whether it's the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, again keeping it nonpartisan, Clearly, there's a party that the Muslim Americans that voted for. Thus, you have a hand in power in terms of when you're going and meeting and or having negotiations in terms of what you can say. When it comes to building natural coalitions with natural allies, again, my other speakers also spoke on this. Muslims are looking to increase the impact of Muslim Americans on both the national political scene as the local scene, national level. In order to do this, we must combine our efforts with other groups who are already working towards the same goals. The Muslim American community is the most diverse religious community in the entire country. You'll be able to increase our capacity and resources through genuine relationship building. And that's a fact. If you're doing something by yourself, you won't get it done as quickly. We have to look at all of this as an anthill, right? A single ant, is not going to build a hill, but if you've got a whole colony, you can build some great things, right? For example, I sit on the board of an organization that's formerly known as Michigan Asian American Progressives, now known as Rising Voices. It services the AAPI community, the Asian American Pacific Islander community. India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, we are all Asian Americans. Thus, for myself and another sister that sits on the board, we were able to take and allocate a lot of the grant monies that we brought in and funnel it to cities such as Hamtramck, Dearborn, Detroit, and other suburban cities, and invest in cities that had a huge Muslim American population and really make impact in those communities based on our relationships and our allyship that we had built with the AAPI community. And vice versa, you see that happening in a lot of different venues, whether it's Black communities, whether it's Hispanic communities, whatever it may be. We need to continue to have these conversations and grow our power together. The last was focus on younger and economically disadvantaged voters. Young Muslims ages 18 to 29 make up 25% of the Muslim American population. That's a huge number. That's 1/4. Historically, we saw that while this demographic was the most active on social media and other venues expressing disapproval of policy and government, they were less likely to vote than the general public. COVID may have changed that in the most recent election, where a lot of mail-in votes were able to be provided, and we saw record level voting. But we need to continue that. Furthermore, when it comes down to those who are disadvantaged economically, they're also less likely to vote when it comes to socioeconomic status, when it comes to issues back in prior to COVID, when you couldn't afford to take off from work. Why voting isn't a national holiday, that behooves me, but at the same time, it was very difficult. We saw record numbers again via mail-in ballots, and things were made a lot easier, where we once areas that historically the Muslim Americans wouldn't have made these kinds of impacts. Approximately 1/3 of Muslim Americans average an income of less than $30K a year, right? And we see this demographic can make a large impact in regards to increasing political engagement. When you look at the city of Hamtramck, for example, the per capita income is $10,000 per year, and this is a huge Muslim American population. So what are we doing to make it easier for our Muslim brothers and sisters to actually get involved and get engaged and create a pathway? That's also a responsibility of looking at which communities need our help the most to actually be able to get engaged, get the education, language barriers, transportation, all of these things come into mind. Now, if you've never been politically engaged and you want to be, how do you get started? Right? There's so many ways to do it. How do you get started? How do you get your foot in the pool? How do you test the waters? First and foremost,
Hassan, if we could have that broader conversation about getting engaged during Q&A, I think that'll be very helpful. Yep.
Yeah, no problem. Yep. I'll finish off with just kind of, going, I know that we're strict on time right now. I'll just say, get registered to vote, go to your local council meetings, engage with elected officials, send letters, send texts, send phone banks, and get involved on campaigns of people that you believe in, that align with your values as a Shia, as a Muslim, as an activist. Make that impact, whether it's as a donor, a volunteer, directly with the campaign, or as a candidate themselves. We need to make sure that we're cultivating leadership from within our communities, candidates and campaign managers, all of the above. And the only way we can do this is by working together and making sure that we're doing this so that we can increase power for our communities, inshallah. I'm looking forward to answering more questions and talking a little bit more during the question and answer session. I appreciate everybody's time. Thank you so much.
Hassan, that was really great. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we'll definitely hear a lot more from you during the Q&A. There's some questions specifically regarding what you were just talking about. With that, I'd like to invite Brother Bakr Moed He is from MPACT. He's an activist, writer, and currently the policy program manager at the Muslims Public Affairs Council. As I mentioned, MPACT. Bakr manages MPACT's Policy Leadership Institute, which consists of 3 anchor programs: the Young Leaders Policy and Government Summit, the Congressional Leadership Development Program, and the Graduate Policy Research Fellowship. With that, I'd like to invite Bakr to join us and please share a few words. Thank you so much, Bakr.
Thank you so much, brother. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. It's an honor to be amongst you all, old friends and new friends. So a little about me. Similar to many of us here, I'm also an immigrant, a refugee. My parents sought refuge in North America from the Ba'athist regime, originally from Najaf, Iraq. And the auto industry took us to Metro Detroit, and that's where I grew up in Dearborn. And Hassan spoke a lot about Dearborn. But to give an idea, I remember going to a court case, traffic stop or whatever it was, and after I finished, it was a Friday, I ran to the mosque for Friday prayer. 15 minutes later, the judge came in and sat down like behind me, Judge David Turfi, and he was recently shortlisted for a federal judgeship. He wasn't chosen, but he's up there right now. But I remember asking him about the case. The case went good for me, so I was thanking him. So I was like, listen, at the court, I am the judge over here. I stand next to you as equals, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is our judge. So that's the environment that I grew up in, and it's a blessing. I feel like many of us don't get that privilege in the United States for just being comfortable with who we are as Shia, as Muslims, as Arab, as minorities, just because of the influx of people that are similar to us that we grew up with. So anyways, I finished my college in Michigan and I made it out to MPAC. The Muslim Public Affairs Council is a non-partisan, non-sectarian organization that represents and works for all American Muslims. We have 2 bureaus, the DC bureau and the Hollywood bureau. The org was founded in the 80s in Los Angeles, and that's where our hub is. And I lead the DC office. Been out there for a couple of years now. Our organization doesn't take foreign money. It's all from local donations. And just to hit off what everybody else was saying, to give an idea of where we were 30 years ago when they started, or even I think in the 90s, if we have a meeting with Congress, and when I say we, meaning the organization, I was still in middle school, but the meeting would get canceled by AIPAC. They'd call the Congress member and tell them that this person is against Palestine, and we weren't welcome to meet with Congress members on the Hill just because of our views. And they're not extreme views. We're supporting, we're opposing apartheid states. So that's where we were, and this is where we are now. My talk is going to be a bit different from everybody else here. It's going to be just more, let's say, informative, just about patriotism and how to be American Muslim patriots. What is healthy patriotism, what isn't? And I'm going to look into the Quran, into Ahadith, maybe even some Western ideology, just to compare how to be a comfortable, a healthy patriot. Patriotism is a word that's been around. It originally means fatherland. I don't know, from probably a few thousand or 1,000 years ago. Webster says it's the love for one's country. And it's also a political ideology, which means national pride is the feeling of love, devotion, and sense of attachment to your homeland, and alliance with other citizens who share the same sentiment. Looking into the Quran, we have Surah Al-Baqarah, verses 30 through 34, where that talk about Iblis with the angels when he did not bow down to them. And I think this is important, a few verses from the Quran to give us an idea of what healthy patriotism is. Iblis, at that time, before he became the devil, was granted the right to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the angels. This is how great of a worshiper he was. They used to call him Tawus al-Malak. So he's like the peacock of the angels. So he was a jinn that was welcomed amongst them. And when God told him commanded them to bow down to the Prophet Adam, he would not bow down. And he said, why would I bow down to him? I'm made from fire and he's made from clay. So, and that's what cast him out of the heavens. But that's important right there. That's the kabbar right there, pride. I am better than them. I am Arab and they're not Arab. I'm white, they're not white. That one thing right there, I'm American and they're not American. That one thing was enough to cast someone from being from the best of worshipers to the devil, right? Moving on, there is also in we have a verse that says in Surah Al-Hujurat 49:13. Everybody knows this verse where we created you from a single pair, male and female, into nations and tribes, so you may know each other. Very the most honored in you in the sight of Allah is the most righteous of you, the one that have the most taqwa, right? This verse shows us that patriotism shouldn't lead us to despising other nations and tribes. And it also shows us that in Allah's eyes, in God's eyes, which is what ultimately matters, the one that has the most piety is the one that's the best of us, not our race, not our ethnicity, not our national origin. Looking at a hadith, and this goes in with Hassan's point where you have to mow your lawn before you mow your neighbor's lawn. We also have a hadith that is similar that says charity starts at home. When you give charity, if you want to donate to people that are in other parts of the world that are poor, but your own brother and sister are starving, or your uncle or your cousin that you don't want to talk to, they're starving, and you don't donate to them first, then it's considered the charity is not about Allah. Charity always starts at home. You have to always take care of your home first before you look outwards. Zakat al-Fitr, we just finished Ramadan, we give our zakat. It's mustahab, it's recommended that we give the charity. I know we grew up always sending money to Iraq, to Middle East, South Asia. However, you're supposed to look for food banks, areas, poor people in your own neighborhoods and donate to them. It's recommended as part of our worship in the month of Ramadan to do that. So this also relates to patriotism, that we should fix our homes first, look and before we look at other nations and other parts of the world to criticize or to try to fix. The last hadith that I think is also relatable is خير الأمور أوسطها, which means the best of manners is secularism. This I think goes to our prophet. So anything taken to an extreme, including patriotism, may be dangerous. Whether it's you completely disconnect yourself and you don't care what happens to your homeland and to your citizens and to your neighbors, or when you reach to the point where you think you're better than everybody else. Looking at in our West society here as American Muslims, one of our founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson, he's attributed to him where he says dissent is the highest form of patriotism, right? I really like this quote because to be an American, according to one of our founding fathers, is not to clap and support and cheer for our government no matter what they do. No, he's saying the highest form of patriotism as the founding father of America is to dissent and to speak out against the government, speak out against the atrocities they're committing. We'll also go to Oscar Wilde. Oscar Wilde was an Irish poet, he's a playwright of the 19th century, as we all know. He says patriotism is the virtue of the vicious. This is the complete opposite right here. You go from what Thomas Jefferson was saying to Oscar Wilde saying to have patriotism is completely. So this is another extreme. But I feel like all these hadith and the Quranic verses and these few quotes right here can kind of let us balance in our head what is comfortable patriotism, what is healthy, what is not. Which this leads into our American exceptionalism. And American exceptionalism has always been attacked from around the world, where we Americans think that we are better than everybody else, we're God's gift to this world, and we are number one. As a brother used to always tell us, we're back-to-back World War champs. This leads down a dangerous path. It leads to a supremacy mentality. And we're seeing the rise of domestic terrorism in America, just white supremacist terrorism. At the end of the day, we must remember that regardless of what nation, what religion, what political system, ethnicity, any identity that's prominent in other parts of the world, we must remember that in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He created us all equal. None of us better in God's eyes other than the ones that have the most taqwa, the most piety. And I hate to quote Putin, but we do have a hadith that says, look at what's being said and not who's saying it. But he addressed us Americans in a New York Times editorial on September 11. I believe it was 2013, around the time when Syria was having its crisis. But the last paragraph in there, he says that he's likes his relationship with President Obama, and there's a growing trust, and he appreciates it. But then he says, I would rather disagree with the case made on American exceptionalism, stating that the United States policy is what makes America different. It's what makes us exceptional. And I think Obama said that a few days prior. He said it's extremely dangerous to encourage people to see themselves as exceptional, no matter what the motivation, regardless of the motivation. There are big countries and small countries, rich and poor, those who have long democratic traditions, those that are finding their way to democracy. Their policies all differ too, and we're all different. But when we're asked for our Lord's blessing, we must not forget that God created us all equal. Right? So it's a very nice quote coming from Putin, but I think it's important for us to consider that when we're thinking of American exceptionalism. So just to conclude and keep this talk short, we need to be patriots. We need to be American patriots, a healthy patriot form. We need to thank our elected officials for taking just actions. When they do something good, we thank them. Just like when we write letters criticizing or attacking their stances that are bad, we must do the same when they take good action. Send in letters, emails, phone calls, all of those must be done when they take good actions. But at the same time, we don't support any injustice that our nation is committing, whether it's locally or abroad. We also take the exact same action. We let them know we don't agree. We vote them out. We challenge them in primaries. We do whatever we can to stop these injustices, because as Thomas Jefferson, dissent is the highest form of patriotism, and we want to be American patriots. We do not want to stand with what they're standing for, and I believe that's what being a healthy patriot enlists. Thanks very much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Bakr. That was really great. I'd like all the speakers to turn on their video if they can, because we'll start the Q&A section now. We've gotten actually a lot of questions. So the first question, and actually the first question from me to you guys is going to be, I've done a lot of work myself building coalitions within our community and more broadly. And so I'd love to get your insights on building coalitions within our own communities and then outside as well. So when we do grassroots work, I think sometimes we're very eager to build coalitions outside of our community when we haven't won our own community over yet. So if you could talk about a little bit of the challenges you might have faced building coalitions and support within our own community and more broadly as well, that'd be great. So feel free to jump in. Hassan, I'll pick on you. You go first.
I can take that. So in prior work, I've, in terms of organizing within the Muslim American community, you definitely run into this issue, right? And I'm glad you brought it up, because before you can start building those allyships with others, you need to have the power of unity within yourselves, right? Or you can do it at the same time. Within the Shia Muslim American community, you do have divisions. Sometimes it's cultural. Sometimes, Hyderabadis versus Pakistanis, right? Those groups, or you have, the Walayat al-Faqih versus non-Walayat al-Faqih groups. You have these issues, or the Arab Americans versus the South Asian Americans. You have two different groups, two different backgrounds, experiences. But one thing you'll notice that's coordinating with all these groups in terms of why there's a division, there just hasn't been enough conversation. There hasn't been enough relationship building. It's more of a, hey, you know what, we don't even want to talk to them. And you get that from sometimes the older community members. From the younger members, we're like, look, we can agree to disagree. And I think that's the thing that really needs to be focused on. Okay, what is our goal? If we have the same goal, there's other things that we can agree to disagree on, right? And we need to make sure that we understand that we're more powerful together to achieve our goal, which is increasing Muslim American power, increasing the Shia Muslim American power within the Muslim American community as well. We can't do that separately. If we're doing it alone, you're not going to get much done. So I think understanding that and coming to a common understanding and having more conversations of that sort is extremely important and pivotal. Genuine relationship building. What does that mean? If you're coming and creating a relationship of, hey, let's have a meeting in a professional atmosphere, but then after that meeting, you're not sending text messages, you're not hanging out, you're not going to dinner, those things make a difference. It makes it important of creating sisterhood and brotherhood amongst the community. Right. And it's just like when you're on a team. I played a lot of sports growing up, so I'll make a lot of sports analogies. You always had team dinners. Why? Those team dinners were important to chemistry. And at the end of the day, the Shia community, whether you agree or disagree on certain things, we are a team. And in order for us to come together to achieve our goals, which is to build our power, we need to make sure that we have the chemistry amongst one another, and then understand that, hey, it's okay to agree to disagree at the end of the day. So, I mean, that's from my experiences, and we've had great success with merging the communities together. Now more so than ever, we see, the South Asian Shia community interacting with the Arab Shia community, and then vice versa, the Shia community as a whole interacting with the Sunni community. Is there a lot of work to be done? Yes, there is, and that's a fact. But are we heading down the right road? I think we are.
That was really great. I really would love feedback from the other panelists as well about how do we get support from within our own community for the work that we're doing. Zara, Bakr, and Rahat, if you want to chime in.
Yeah, I had a comment. So, a lot of discussion in our community is about grassroots and getting the word out to the volunteer level, to the community level, and others. There's multiple strategies. I think grassroots is definitely one of the most popular and most effective strategies. But there are other strategies like the grass top strategy, where you reach out to certain people who are in positions of influence and you try to get your work done that way. Many different organizations in our community have modeled themselves after these different strategies. There are grassroots organizations, there are grass top organizations, there's types of organizations called 1.5, where it's kind of in the middle, where they solicit community support and also try to directly influence leadership and political officials and the like. So the number of strategies that can be used, and the fact that our community actually is using numerous strategies to get this type of work done, community work done, political work done, I think really speaks to the resilience of the community, and that there's something for everyone, and the combined effort of different types of doing things, different ways of doing things, is really what has led to a lot of the success that our community has enjoyed.
I would also like to add that our communities are very generous with help, with support, with showing up to help out and to take out their checkbooks. However, like we see that. We see all the masajid that we've built, the community centers, the events. If somebody in the community needs help, we've seen a text message that goes out with a GoFundMe and the community steps up right away. So they are very generous. However, our community is also that we're not naive. We don't like to waste our money, especially brown people. Brown people were very careful with getting the most bang for the buck, and at times for the penny as well. So it's our duty to support those that do the right work, not to support names, to support individuals, support organizations that do the good work, and not to support organizations that belong to our cousin or to whatever. At the end of the day, intentions really matter, and it's very hard to find out what the intentions of people are, if they're doing this work to grow themselves or if they're doing this work for the sake of the community. But we, as let's say, as advocates, as members, we need to keep our intentions pure, and our communities will see that, and they will support. They will support us based on our intentions.
Great. And Zara, if you want to comment on that theme, then we go to the next question.
Sure. I think all of you covered it really well. I think one thing that would be helpful for, to garner support for the work that we're doing is to have a lot more work towards a more inclusive community. I think sometimes our community, like what a lot of you were saying with, these cultural rivalries and such, there's those aspects, and there's also the aspect of gender and the aspect of like the spectrum of faith. And I think that sometimes we don't really respect, women as much as we need to, and include them in these conversations and really like elevate their voices, because we have been marginalized for a very long time, and the value that women can add to these conversations is, countless and is very powerful, and we need to be making space for more women in all these different realms. And I know that, in my work in journalism, I haven't been taken seriously when I'm trying to cover stories around this type of thing and trying to garner sources and trying to, gain traction on this. It's like I'm trying to ask for something very serious and, like kind of contact someone's uncle that, has faced some persecution. And they're like, oh, like, can you come photograph my child's birthday party? And it's like, I'm trying to do something here, like these types of challenges that we're seeing makes it a lot more harder and creates obstacles within the community. And so, a lot of you are talking about the support that you've received, and I can't say the same, like I really appreciate our community and I fight for our community every day, but part of that is also holding our community accountable for what more we can do and how much growth that needs to be made on that spectrum. And also for so many people that do feel silenced and not feeling like, because they're not people that go to the masjid as much as some of us, that doesn't mean that they're not a valid perspective in our community, and including those voices and reaching out to them, because sometimes those are the people that will turn out to vote or will turn out to be active. And so, including so many people on the spectrum of faith, because being Shia isn't only, being one kind of Shia. There's such a spectrum within that, and it's about including everybody and really making a point to elevate the voices that have been for so long pushed aside.
That was really great. I think building inclusive communities obviously gender, but also levels of practice and background is something that we really need to continue to work on, making sure our spaces and organizations are welcoming to everybody. And that's something that definitely we should always keep in mind and work towards as organizations and individuals and communities as well. So the next question I have is from Houston. And I have like 20 questions, so I don't think we're going to go through all of them, but I'll do my best to pick the best ones. So it says, let's be honest, there are issues that are most pertinent to the Shia community than mainstream Muslims or even to society in general. What should we do to address our issues with the limited resources we have and then bring them to the mainstream? It's basically getting at that there are important issues that are just specific to the Shia community that are not necessarily important to the broader Muslim community. And so it's even harder to get those into the mainstream. And I think, Zara, you've had success with that. And we've had success with that around Shia killings and some of the other issues as well. So how do we get our issues to the mainstream? I guess that's what it's getting at.
I'd like to jump in. This is an extremely difficult question. When I was meeting with President Obama, the instruction that was, or the goal for the meeting was given, discuss your domestic issues, raise anything you want, but the focus is domestic. And I spoke with maybe 15 or 20 scholars. I spoke with different organizations, different leaders. And in the United States, as a domestic policy, there's very few, if any, issues that are unique to the Shia community. A lot of the problems that we face, other Muslims face, Sunnis face, a lot of those problems other minorities face, other people face. Domestically, it's very...
I think we lost Rahat. Rahat, are you there? Well, while Rahat reconnects, if anybody wants to take that question, I'm more than happy to have one of the other panelists. Go ahead.
Yeah, I can jump in if you guys want.
Yeah, go right ahead. Yep.
I have recently with the Palestinian issue that was going on and all the protests that are happening, and I went out to a few protests there in DC, and I'm used to going out in Dearborn. In Dearborn, we go out, we're all Arab, all Muslims, and mostly Shia, and we're all holding whatever flag, whatever cause it is, whether it's in Iraq, whether it's in Pakistan, or whether it's in what's going on in Afghanistan or in Palestine. When I went out in Washington, D.C. Last week, it was a massive protest. The majority of us were not brown or Muslim, like what I'm used to. There was white, there was black, there was all other proportions of society, religious, everything, non-religious, ethnicities. It was very diverse, and I think that's how they build coalitions. The movements for African Americans were there too. The Black Lives Matter people and other organizations showed up as well. If you support causes that are I mean, it comes down to human security and human rights. If you support human rights and you stand out for other people, they'll come for you as well. And I think that's one way to highlight our issues as Shia Muslims that are happening globally. When we go out for the Baqiyya, we should not be going out for the Baqiyya holding banners that make no sense with people that are going on over here. That does nothing. We go march down the street, don't know if we're having a parade, if we're celebrating, or if we're angry or pissed. However, you need to relate with this community, invite them to events, speak in English with them, have English banners, explain to them what's going on, and show up for their causes as well, and show up with their banners and with their signs. That way you build coalitions. At the end of the day, we are 1% of this nation, right? Through this coalition building, through you supporting other causes, you will get those people to support you, and that's how we increase our influence as 1% of the country as well for the causes that we care about as Shia Muslims, or as Muslims, or as brown people, or so on and so on.
So one thing that I like to kind of take the conversation to, so I had a lot of experience setting up Shia chaplaincy. So the first Shia chaplaincy that was set up at New York University, so some of the work that I did. But one of the things that I noticed that was happening throughout the country at different college campuses is, an event would happen for Palestine, and we would always have support, and we always should have support. And there was a question actually asked for all the panelists, what have you done to support Palestine? And I'll let you guys address that afterwards. But and then something else would happen, let's say in North Carolina, or there would be a mass shooting or something, and we would have vigils and vigils for everything. But when there would be a massacre of Shias, there would be no vigil, even though the Shias had been going to the vigils and going to the protests and showing support. And there would be silence from broader national organizations. I remember very clearly a time where we were doing national campaigns where, we were trying to bring attention to the problem of Bahrain at that time in particular. And for national mainstream Muslim organizations would say, we don't talk about foreign policy related issues, when they would clearly talk about foreign policy issues when it came to Palestine, but Shia issues, not so much. So that's another question. How do we? Do you guys feel that has changed in the last 10 years? Are more organizations that are saying that they're inclusive of a broader Muslim identity, including Shia issues in their organizations, or is it still just Shia organizations talking about Shia issues?
Yeah, I'd say, I'm someone that has been active in the Palestine movement for a very long time. At Northwestern, I was one of the people that helped our student government pass a divestment resolution. And that was something I'm really proud of. It was incredible. It took like a couple of years and a lot of fights and a lot of controversy on campus, and we were able to pass that. And Palestine is something that I've stood for consistently for many years. But when it comes to, Shia persecution, you don't see people standing up, even people I have been active with on Palestine, and asking them to support our cause and say, hey, this is the same thing. There's so many parallels here in terms of human rights and social justice. And it is really, truly awful to see that when that solidarity isn't there. But unfortunately, when it comes to this stuff, it's not a competition. It's not about getting everyone to well, I stood up for you, you better stand up for me. Fortunately, that's not how it works. If you have a conviction and you have a belief, you have to be consistent. If other people aren't consistent, that's on them. If you show up for Palestine, keep showing up. If you show up for Black Lives Matter, you keep showing up. You're not doing it to get anything in return. You're not doing it to prove something and have I scratch my back, you scratch yours, that phrase. We're not trying to prove that point. We're trying to show up in every place and set an example that, my convictions are consistent, and hopefully other people will catch on. And, I'm not going to say I've changed the world with that, but I've seen several people that previously were afraid to speak out on Shia persecution, speaking out. Sorry.
No, Zara, I completely agree with you. And I think that is how we should be doing it, right? Like we should be getting to the causes that are the causes that need attention. But Bakr had brought up the point about coalition building, and then we need to show our support to other causes because they will also support us in return. But my experience has been often that we would show our support, but we will not get support in return. Maybe that's a conversation that we don't want to get too much deeper into.
No, it's true. I don't disagree with you. That is true, but that isn't a reason to change what we're doing. We're not doing this for other people. We're doing this for our own conviction, our principles that, what's happening in Palestine is wrong. What's happening to Black people in America is wrong, regardless of if we're being appreciated for it or if we're being, treated fairly for it. That's not the point. Our convictions are our convictions. And maybe that's a journalism perspective. It's well, that's the fact. I'm going to go fight for that fact. The same goes with Shia persecution. I think for me, it's not about this agenda of oh, well, I'm a Shia and I want you to fight for me. It's about there's this thing that's happening that everyone is downplaying, and we need to do justice to what is going on here, because it's not okay that in 2021 Shia people in Pakistan still can't say that we're being persecuted out loud. They still can't say that to a camera. They can't say that on Dawn. They can't say that on GOTV. And the fact that they can't say that is the problem. It's I don't know. I'm just saying that I agree with you. There needs to be a lot more support when it comes to Shia persecution. But I feel that if we consistently keep showing up and we're consistent in our convictions, I hope that one day that will pay off.
Well, can I add to this? First of all, Palestine is an American issue. Support for Israel is the United States. Israel today exists on occupied Palestinian lands because of the United States. So Palestine is an American issue, and this is the reason why it's gained momentum in the United States. It's because it's our country, it's our tax money, it's our government that's allowing the Israeli Zionist government to commit this atrocity against Palestinians. So that's one reason why I feel like Jane Doe from down the street would care about showing up for Palestine and would not care what's going on with the Hazari Afghanis in Afghanistan or with ISIS in Iraq as much. Maybe Iraq, they also feel like they're responsible, they're conscious. But that's one point for regarding Palestine. Regarding us, our killings, I remember around the same time what was happening, we had that school in Afghanistan, that Sayyid al-Shuhada school that took out all our female students that were there, which ruthless attack. I was looking at statements from our Maraja and Qom and Najaf, and they all issued statements very quickly for Palestine, right? It took 2 or 3 days for most of them to tweet or issue a statement, and I was like, why? Like this is ours. So it goes deeper. It's not just what's going on over here. However, for us, what can we do over here? We need to be involved, and it goes back to the same thing. If Hassan Sheikh or if Zahra Haidar or Naqi Haidar, if you guys work hard enough and you make the right connections, and one day you are in those seats that are helping make those decisions, like Brother Rahat was with the bombing in Syria, you will influence. You will get the Wayne County Commissioner issued a statement in support of Palestine. That has nothing to do with our foreign policy or government, but that's because Sam Beydoun is a commissioner from Dearborn inside the county, right? So when you are in those seats, those statements will start coming out, and this is how we get it. There was a Secretary of State in the 80s that said politics are all local, and I understand that now because I have friends that used to be staffers that are now in the White House. So I text people that are in the White House. The most powerful Muslim on the Hill was not Rashida Tlaib or Han Omar. It was Rima Dadin, who was for Dick Durbin for years. We see her on C-SPAN, a Palestinian Muslim woman that was the most powerful, most influential Muslim on the Hill because Durbin trusted her. And you guys should watch the tribute that Durbin gave to her when Biden took her to the White House. So that's one way for us to get our to gain support for our movements. And to add to what Zahra said, Zahra Haidar, we need to be consistent, and that is the most important thing. We do not look the other way when let's say Bashar al-Assad is committing crimes. No matter how good Bashar al-Assad is for our movements, we need to stand for human rights. If we are not being genuine ourselves with atrocities that are being committed, whether that person helps us or not, others will not take it serious. I always joke about Dearborn, where I tell me the person's last name and I can tell you if they like Bashar or Saddam, right? Why is it that case? Why is it because of our sect we can know what dictator this person supports, what dictator they don't? So we definitely need to be consistent. Be honest. We can say this person is good for our politics, but this is wrong, you know? But at the end of the day, we are held accountable for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And a lot of the work that we do as American Muslims is because of our identity. And no matter how small it is, I went to a camp when I was a kid in Taylor, Michigan. There's a big Pakistani community there. They have a humongous mosque, and it's overwhelmingly Sunni, probably all Sunni. And we're the only Shia family that went. And I remember my father received criticism, why are you sending your kids? My dad's like, I have 6 kids, they're going for 6 weeks. Let them go have fun. He wanted a break from us. It was their own vacation by sending us to this camp. However, we went to this camp, we prayed, we ate, met Muslims. There's nothing, like, I wasn't indoctrinated or anything. But the reason why I remember this, there was a hadith they brought up over there, which I don't think it's a hadith, more of like a little fable, but I was told the hadith where when Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam, Prophet Abraham was cast into that fire that was created by the non-believers. There was a frog that would hop to a pond, take water, hop back, spit water, trying to extinguish it. And all the other animals are allegedly laughing at him, like, what are you doing? Like, you're going to turn off the whole fire by yourself? And he said, in front of my God, this is what I can do. And I'm going to do what I can do no matter how insignificant I seem it may be.
Thank you so much, Bakr. Hassan, do you want to chime in, or we could jump to next questions? We have more questions I think that you'll like.
Yeah, let's jump into the next question. So
the next question, this is from Chicago and from New York. I'm going to combine them. What is the best way to empower individuals to run for office? What should be the first steps to building a coalition? As Muslims, can we really run an honest and clean political campaign? Is that even realistic? Hassan, you want to take that?
Yes, I do. I think, well, in order to get involved on a campaign, right, you know, there's a few things that need to come into play. First off, you need to identify the candidate and which campaign you're trying to get involved in, right? And if it's somebody that's never been involved in anything before, again, ask yourself, you know, are you registered to vote? You know, find out who your elected officials are before anything. Study your layout. What's your ground layout? Where do you live? who's your, council, who's your city mayor, who's your state rep, your congressperson, your senator, whatever it may be. Learn the layout, learn the groundwork, find out, okay, what elections are coming up, who is running, what campaigns are out there that align with my values, align with my morals, and more importantly, will make a positive impact for the Shia community, the Muslim community, and for humanity, right? Again, Muslim and Shia issues are not just Muslim and Shia issues, they're human issues, especially when you're looking at economy, when you're looking at environment, when you're looking at infrastructure, when you're looking at criminal justice reform, civil rights. These are all issues that everyone cares about. And this is not, these aren't issues that are just owned by our demographic. So you got to look at which candidate fits best into this mold that can make the most amount of impact. Now, when it comes to cultivating leadership from within our own communities, we need to create a roadmap for individuals to say, and keep an eye on the young leaders that we feel ourselves should go down that path. And then also give them the confidence and the training to know to check their nafs. A lot of times people say, okay, and this question in itself is it feeds into the stereotype of, oh, you if you're in politics, you got to lie, you got to lose your values, you got to lose your morals. No, you don't. For example, I always give the example of Abdullah Hamoud, State Representative Abdullah Hamoud, who was in the State House, who has a Palestinian flag in his office, who just this past weekend, when he met Biden this past week, gave him a letter, who can't be bought, who stands true, who happens to be a Shia Muslim, stands true to his values, runs a great campaign. It definitely can be done. But we need to make sure that we...
Hassan, we can't hear you. Oh, no, we can't. I'm sorry.
Read your lips.
Why don't we hear back from you? Because I know Zara has to leave soon too, so we'll come back to you in a second. Just hold your thought. Zara, there's a question specifically, I think that is suited for you. So I'm going to ask you the question. This is from outside the US, from the UK. I really love the concept of telling a story and our story, but how do we know which is the best story to share and that will get picked up by regular media or social media? And as we deal with the issue and concerns, how do we not lose ourselves in the process?
Yeah, that's great. That's a really great point. It is hard to not lose yourself in the process of telling this kind of story. There are a lot of pressures and expectations and standards to uphold. And when you're trying to break out of the status quo and tell a story that hasn't been told or go against what people want you to tell, it is tough. But I think, that's something where your faith comes into play. And, in the Shia Islam, as so many of us said, activism is something that is ingrained in us from a young age because of Karbala and so many other things that, I, from a very young age, had this conviction of, like peer pressure is just not something that can come to me. And so it's very about sticking to the path that you're trying to convey. And if you're fighting for the right thing, then hold on to that and keep going. And so that's just like how you avoid the external pressures. But in terms of covering those stories and picking a story, I think it comes from, go from an angle that is the highest quality possible product that you can do. And so, with my Shia persecution piece, I could have done so many other smaller pieces. There were so many Shia killings going on for so many years while I was at Now This before I chose to cover that story. And everyone, in my community would be like, why aren't you covering this? Why aren't you covering this? And I'm like, I'm waiting for the right time to tell the right story. Because if I tell this one story, it will, with bad quality footage and almost no research and just putting out a clip just to put it out and no one will watch it. And next time my editors may not be as interested in telling a story that isn't getting as much traction. And so instead I waited, I built up this narrative, and it was hard to see all these horrible things happening that I couldn't report on because I was like, I'm waiting for the right way to tell this story in a comprehensive way, because I can't do justice to it with like a 2-minute clip, and like even with 13-minute film that I did, it wasn't enough. I got so many people talking about, how I didn't even have a chance to cover the Hazara community. And that was a valid claim. And it was just like, well, if I had done that, it might have taken another year, And so it's about finding the right way to tell that story and maintaining a really high quality and maintaining the standards that are expected of any other story that you're seeing, take that time, get that higher quality footage, spend that time with your research, get that grant or whatever you need to make sure that it's it's meeting that bar. And so people aren't seeing this and being turned away by simple superficial things like this footage is blurry, or, you know, this reporter doesn't seem legit. You need to be legit, become that, and then people will come and listen to your story. You have to have that credibility, and you have to build it up, and you have to you know, follow through on it as well. And so whoever's telling the story, I support you, and you've got this, and just, you know, work on it. Even if it takes a little longer, just, you know, it's going to be worth it in the end. And since I do have to sign off, you know, if anyone wants to stay in touch with me, I'd love to connect with the other panelists after this as well. But if anyone wants to stay in touch with me in any way, it's just at Zahra Heather with an extra R at the end, because my name was taken. So on any social platform. But thank you all so much for having me.
Follow on Twitter 10 minutes ago.
Yes. Oh, same back.
Yep.
Bye.
Thank you so much, Zara, for joining us. So Hassan, do you want to continue your thought? Is your audio okay?
Yeah, I'm good now. I apologize. I had a choppy connection. But when it comes to wanting to run for office as a community, we have a responsibility to support those and provide the support for those that are going to do well in representing our community in office, right? Whether that's donating, whether that's campaigning for them. And then you yourself, if you are thinking about running for office, what's the reason? Why are you running for office? At the end of the day, you know, when getting into this work, you need to continuously check your nafs. Are you about it for the community? Because it's very easy to, as people say, and that's why it's not necessarily for everybody, right? You need to make sure that you're strong enough to be able to go into this world and stay true to your values. And you need to have a good group of people around you that can tell you, hey, Hassan, you know, don't forget A, don't forget B, don't forget C. Hey, we saw this, you're going this. You need people to kind of reel you in. You need to have a good support group as well. People that you continuously meet with once a month. You know, for me, I have a couple of mentors that I continuously meet with on a continuous basis from you know, pre-COVID, it was, you know, Dawood Ali from CARE and others that I, you know, Iltifat Hamzavi's and, you know, Sheikh Sam, you know, whoever it may be, to kind of make sure, you know, that I'm centered in terms of the work that I'm doing. And I'm not even an elected official. So when you become an elected official and you're running a campaign and you're running that way, you're going to get attacked. You're going to get all that. But when you get the support from the community, it's easier to take that because you know that you have people behind you. And it's easier to stand true to who you are. It's easier to stand true to the dean and really stand for what the community wants. But again, historically, we haven't necessarily done that in every avenue. In Michigan, we've been able to do that a lot better, I feel, than on a national level. But when you look at it nationally, a lot of Muslims that run for office and are involved in campaigns, they get torn down by our own community. And thus we lose potential Muslims in these positions that could have really advocated for our community in such great ways on certain issues. So I think as a community, we really need to be open-minded and making sure that we're supporting individuals that want to go down this route, guiding them towards the right avenues to really get the skills and the skill sets and the trainings to do it. And then making sure that that individual is continuously checking themselves and has a good group of support and people around them.
That's really great. Thanks, Hassan. I had a question earlier, and I think you guys have talked about it as well, specifically for Bakr and Hassan. So what have your organization specifically done and for the cause of Palestine? I know it's something that's on everyone's mind, and in your current role as well. And then Hassan, if you could talk about that as well in your role, how's your interaction been with that? So Bakr, if you want to take that on.
Sure. So at MPAC, so Palestine is a Muslim issue. It's also an Arab issue. It's also a human rights issue. But we advocate for American Muslim issues, and it is definitely a Muslim issue. And I want to say, like, the biggest proportion of American Muslims are Black. So the biggest proportion is not even South Asians or Arab. But it's still important that when polled, American Muslims really care about Palestine. So historically, our organization has done a lot. If you go on unpack.org and search Palestine, you're going to see the decades, the statements, the work, the meetings that we've had. With what just happened, this is the first time an issue happens in Palestine that's reaches this caliber since I joined the organization. We held the interfaith press conference in Los Angeles on the day of Eid. That there was priests and rabbis that came, and local news in Los Angeles showed up. We issued a statement to the State Department, to the White House, to Congress members that passed the laws, or that introduced bills like Senator Bernie Sanders, Betty McCollum, AOC, thanking them for this, and we created a landing site, Impact.org Palestine, showing all these bills, bill tracker for our people to call in. We're also working on the Leahy Law. The Leahy Law is named after Patrick Leahy, which says that the United States cannot support or cannot sell arms to a government that is committing human rights violations. We wrote a letter to Blinken. We posted this letter online. We're trying to get support. We're advocating for our Congress members to bring this up because they passed this law. I think it started in the 90s and was finalized in 2014 during the Arab Spring to not support dictators. And it was brought up in 2016 for the crimes that Israel was committing by Patrick Leahy, Senator Leahy. However, that was an election year and nobody wanted to go anywhere near it. So the time is different now. If that law comes up, we can use this law to block the $735 billion or $1 million arms deal that just came through. So we're working on that as well. Saying that, we also follow the lead of American Palestinian organizations, Muslim, secular or not, because they are leading the front for us as well.
And Hassan, the same question for you.
Yeah, so I'm involved in a couple of organizations, so I'll kind of go through just a few of things that are happening. You know, from an Engage Michigan standpoint, I'm now a board member here, and you know, we've been starting to meet with U.S. administration and called for an immediate stop to all operations that are going in Gaza from the Israeli occupation and apartheid state. All of our state chapters were engaging with offices and setting up meetings. Here in Michigan, we set up meetings with Senator Gary Peters, Congresswoman Haley Stevens, and Congresswoman Elissa Slotkin, who put out very problematic statements, and they weren't what we saw as what we wanted to have put out. And our first meeting went decently, and hopefully we're going to make more action on it and get more pull. But what comes from it is, look, last election, like I said, we helped you get elected, and and the Muslim American vote made a difference. Do you want our continued support? And this is where that power comes in handy now, because we in our meeting, we are saying to them, if you want our support in the next election, this messaging needs to change, your stance needs to change, and these are our wants. Otherwise, don't expect our vote, don't expect our money, and don't expect our support. We've endorsed candidates, and all of our endorsed candidates were emailed to endorse the Representative Newman and Pocan letter calling for Blinken for action to protect the Palestinians. Every member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee has been emailed about this crisis, and about the McCollum bill, which we also have an active call to action for, which we sent out, where we've been involved in having conversations with the White House, and trying to make some waves there. We've sent over 25,000 emails and tweets to members of Congress calling for immediate action to end the crisis, and which is also a call to action which we've shared. All the actions we're doing connect directly to the White House. We've, in personal capacities and whatnot, attended protests. I'm speaking at one tomorrow, and then furthermore, it's as Bakr said, when it comes to this. Also allowing and making sure that the Palestinian Americans are at the forefront of this. Our executive director here in Michigan is Palestinian, so we follow her lead, and we have Palestinians on our board. We follow their lead in terms of messaging, in terms of what is best for the Palestinian American community and what their wants and desires are. But there's a lot of work being done behind the scenes, and hopefully we'll be able to make some action on it. And we thank Bakr and his organization and other organizations that are also doing the work.
Thank you so much, Hassan. One theme that I've seen in the questions, there have been actually a lot of questions, is also what type of organizations that are engaged politically could the Shia community support, and also local and national organizations. So specifically political organizations that are in line with our views and principles, either from the community or outside the community, that are good places for us to support both our financial efforts and our personal manpower. So Bakr, I think you have a bias, but.
You all have a bias. This is a bad question to ask. Support local organizations that do the work. I know the ground movement in Dearborn in Michigan, so I know more organizations in Michigan. So we have like Zaman International that has food banks and whatnot. I always support Zaman International. I give them my zakat al-fitr and any donations that I have because I know where that money goes. Support organizations that work on a state level. There's local chapters for many national organizations and states. MGAGE is one. MGAGE, if you do not like their national chapter for whatever reason, you know their state chapter. You know the people that run the work and they do the work, and you see the work that they do. Welcome them, help them out, donate to them. Support the national organizations. Look for the organizations that don't have a bias, that work for American Muslims across the level. They're not going to take a stance that's going to hurt one community over another. And I'm with MPAC. MPAC took me. My name is Mohammed Bakr, and I'm from Najaf, Iraq, and I'm Shi'i. I never hide my identity or my views, no matter what. And that was a problem that I had going to DC. And I was told, you're not going to find a job. The first interview with MPAC and everything went good. And I've been there ever since. Interns come on as Shias. There's past employees that are Shias. Our Congress program, which spends almost $7,000 on fellows to come and intern in DC for the summer. There's always been Shias in the cohort, whoever applies. They don't look at sect. That's far from it. So support organizations that do work like that do support our communities and our youth. What I don't like is don't look at the identity of the organization, look at the work that they do, whether it's Muslim or not, or secular or not, or Christian or not, or American or not. Just look at the work that's being done, look at the outcome. You know, the cost benefit analysis. Is the benefit coming out good for us? Is it something that I can live with when I face my Lord? Then support that organization. And the same with candidates. Same with the candidates that are running locally, small races, big races. One way to scare Alyssa Slotkin, for example, which is a different ballgame, but let's say she was in an area with many Arab, challenge her in a primary, take away the votes from her, and she'll lose, right? Or maybe she will not lose, but eventually you build a momentum for them to be primaried out. And right now, Chuck Schumer is watching his seat. He's really watching what words to come out of his mouth regarding Palestine because of what's going on in New York with AOC and the movement that's being created. He's really afraid of being primaried out. So donate to those candidates as well. I'll pass it on to Hassan.
No, I agree with you, Bakr. I think that looking at the work and the context of the resume of the organization is extremely important. Sometimes people may not like national levels. Look at the chapters, look at the state chapters, and look at their the resume of work. There's numerous organizations out there, MPAC, organizations I'm involved in. One thing that I forgot to mention in terms of work that we're doing, my wife and I are along with efforts with the Amity Foundation, who are working with PCRF and PAMA. We are currently fundraising for medical assistance for Palestinian Americans. Our goal is 3,000 donors at $20 a piece, which is nothing. And hopefully we can raise $60K to send over. PCRF building was just recently bombed. We had missile attacks. We saw, so when it comes to which organization to donate to, it kind of comes down to what is your goal for your money. Do you want to donate to engagement work? Do you want to donate to a PAC? Do you want to donate to advocacy work? What is your goal for what you want to get involved in? And if you don't necessarily know how to differentiate which one is most important to you, as Zara shared her email, I would love to share mine with everybody as well. Feel free to reach out to me, and I can help kind of navigate those waters and say, because there's a lot of organizations out there.
Hassan, we're having trouble with your audio again. I'm sorry. Do you want to try to? Okay. Well, we can't hear you, so let me jump in for a second while you. Yeah.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Yep, go ahead.
So what I was saying, as Rahat said, there are a lot of organizations out there, and we went from 0 to 100 real quick. And so when it comes down to what organizations you want to put your money towards, I'm more than happy to help navigate those waters and say, these are the organizations that do this work, organizations do that work, and then that work. And then you guys can, do the research and say, this is the organization that works best for me in terms of which one I want to support. But there's different aspects to engagement. advocacy, candidates, and straight education and engagement work, voter registration work, right? So it depends on what's most important to you and where you want your money to go.
Can I add to what you were saying, if you don't mind, or?
Go ahead.
So this is kind of related to the past question about the Shia killings that happen around the world of persecution. We need to have organizations. There is never enough organizations that specialize in these subjects right over here. Shia Rights Watch, as Rahat mentioned, is meeting with the government regularly. They came and they filled the gap. They created an organization, a very specific goal, and they went out there. MPAC does not, like we come on a grander scale. We don't dive deep into issues like that. However, when there are organizations that exist, we follow their lead and we support them and we bring our support to them, right? So these organizations are important to exist in Washington, D.C. and in local cities around the United States that are big and populous. These organizations are also worth the support. I've been having a hard time. I'm going to give a shout out over here to finding a Hazari Afghani Tirana article for MPAC. It goes out to our newsletter. It goes out to policymakers. I've reached out in the UK. I've reached out in New York. I've been putting out a call for the past few weeks. I could not find someone to write an article for me, nor do I find an organization that I can highlight. So that's the problem that we have as well. We need to have these organizations that do this work that are very specific, and then we all work together. Like their support comes from one organization to another, and we bring our supporters with each other, and that's also part of coalition building.
Great. So I think we're running pretty. We're over time already. So I'll suggest one organization as well, and I have to say that there are actually a ton more questions. So maybe we'll have to do a part 2 of this and have you guys back. One of the organizations that's been doing great work is Imamia Medics International. They do local work as well as international work, and they've been around for a good amount of time. And that's something that is a grassroots Shia organization, and they're doing amazing work locally and internationally. So if people are interested in that organization, so I'd love to have closing thoughts from you guys, and then I think we'll wrap up for today. So whoever would like to go first, that'd be great.
Baka, go ahead.
It's a pleasure to be here with you guys today. I know that whenever something goes on in our native homelands and we see how the United States reacts, we all get we feel disengaged with our government, whether it's the president or Congress. And even with Biden right now, the stances that he took, with the email that he sent out yesterday that thanked a lot of Zionist organizations, but did not mention any Muslim organizations or Palestinian organizations that are on the opposite side. So even with that being said, a Palestinian activist, I was listening to his podcast yesterday, and he was saying that in Islam, pork is forbidden, and you cannot have pork. However, nothing is absolute. If you're starving in the desert, then pork is acceptable. And he said that's what Biden is. Biden is our ham sandwich. During the past election, we all supported Bernie. He was an advocate for Bernie, a surrogate as well. However, the race came down to Trump and Biden. It's like we were starving, we did a ham sandwich. Now we're not starving. We don't have to support him anymore. Now we can advocate against him and advocate for the causes that we care about. So I think that's a good way of looking at it. So we keep going, we keep marching, and the momentum is building with us, inshallah.
I want to thank all of the organizers for this event and all of our fellow panelists, especially Sadaf, who took the leap to be a candidate and won and is continuing to do so. And we need, as a community, continue to support individuals like her so we can have more Sadafs, more Rashidas, more Abdullah Hamouds, more Ilhans, more people that represent us. And some of them, we may not agree with them on everything, but at the same time, they're moving the needle in a lot of issues that are important to us that have never been moved like they've been moved today. I really want to, stress the fact that this conversation to me means a lot. Growing up in a Shia community, that it doesn't necessarily, engage in political conversations. Our communities come a long way. Again, going back to Rahat's, talk about where we've been over the years. It makes me excited, makes me hopeful for where we're going to be going. And I'm looking forward to building the power of our community together, building for our future and building for our children, inshallah. And may Allah bless everyone that's watching and everyone that's been a part of this for all the work that you guys do. I'm here to help and support and amplify everyone in any way that I possibly can. Thank you.
May Allah bless you, Brother Naqi, and bless whoever held this in.
Hassan, Yep. So specifically, a lot of credit goes to Hassan Rizvi and Beameam, a Message of Peace, based out of New Jersey, the organization that I mentioned earlier. They've been doing this work, and Hassan's really been a tour de force during the pandemic, putting together a lot of these events and having these important conversations when we can't have them in person online. So with that, I'd like to also thank everyone for joining us, all the panelists, Sadaf, Zara, Bakr, and Hassan, as well as Hassan Rizvi for helping organize this event. And we'll definitely do a part 2 and a follow-up. And I think hopefully we'll continue to have these conversations and go deeper into some of the issues that were brought up today. And if you guys could share your contact information. I think Sadaf, Zara did, Hassan did as well. Bakr, did you share your email? You want to let the viewers know?
It's bakr@mpact.org, BAQIR@mpact.org. If you go to mpact.org, click on staff, you'll see my email there as well.
Great.
My Twitter's there as well.
Great. Thank you so much, everybody. Hassan, do you have anything else to add?
No, I just want to say, again, it's been an honor with everyone. And feel free to message me, call me, if there's any way that I can help anyone out there in regards to getting more engaged and any other way that I can help. I'm here for the community, as we all need to stick together in terms of building our power together, inshallah.
We have a bright future ahead, but a lot of work to do still. So
definitely.
Thank you guys. Thank you for joining us.
Take care. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamualaikum. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Allahumma kulli lawiyaka al-hujjat ibn al-Hasan salawatuka alayhi wa ala abba'ib fi hadhihi as-sa'a fi kulli as-sa'a waliyun hafidun qahidun wa nasin wa hatalina wayna hatta tuskinu al-zakatu wa tawattihu fiha tawila. Nada hadri yali.